Oh, welcome to the Story Studio podcast where Sean can't stop laughing. What just happened is when we record these live, we typically record.
If you want to replay this story.
No, just very quickly. We record.
He's not. He knows what to say and what not to say.
We record Worst Show Ever beforehand so that we can like lube Dave up. And then, so that he's in theory more awake for this one.
Lube.
But then Dave said,
my family's home.
Okay, but you just blew my punchline. I was going to say, Dave just said the
Sean,
four worst words in podcasting. My family is home. And so we shut it down, but not until only after we had recorded a 5-minute mercy kill thing that we had to mercy kill, basically.
Which Dave actually referred to it as a mercy killing.
He said it was a mercy killing. Anyway, so because of that, we don't have that. Then they're still snickering because they didn't get it out. So
it was kind of like one of those scenes, like in a movie where you have the hacker, and all of a sudden, like everyone's like descending on his house. He's like flipping switches and burning shit and like diving the fuck out. That's what abandoning the show's like.
Thank you, Dave.
The thing explodes behind you. So today we
go in a tunnel and leave.
Today we're going to talk about how we generate ideas. And we have, how do I mute Sean? I can do it.
All right. This is because we had a whole thing this week about how Dave loves his wedding night joke.
All right. So now that I've muted Sean, we can finally continue with the show. So today we're going to talk about how we generate ideas. We do have our favorite Neeve in the world back, Neeve Silver. All the other ones out there. And because Sean and Neeve co-wrote the book, Endless Ideas, which we published recently. And what's the, I'll go ahead and give the link while I'm in huckster mode, sterlingandstone.net/endless-ideas. And that's the book we're going to be talking about today. But more generally, the idea generation process. And so with all of that said, I will step back and say, welcome to the show, Neeve. And Sean, if you can behave, you're unmuted again.
It's not.
No, he is.
Well, hello. Neeve she's, I don't know, she rests in this place between me and Johnny, I think, where she's definitely got the ideas, but she's all three of us. That's what's interesting. That's true.
There's serious tricks with all three of us.
I didn't know if we wanted to dredge your mental issues up, but if we do, then
just in general,
there's a lot of Dave there too.
You are what God has been working on forever. You are finally all of us perfected
in one human.
No, that is very, very.
He can retire now.
There's the wild ideas that I tend to have. There's the reasoned approach to those ideas that Johnny tends to have, and there's the hesitancy about complex issues and things that are unseen that make it out of hand. I think that's sustainability, scope creep, the stuff that it's not.
I can never hear scope creep without laughing, not once.
Her evaluation of an idea as far as what will make that not only executable, but something we can stick around long term. The way she has transformed our systems. It really is, Johnny's totally right. It is a balance of all three of us, and joking aside, there is some neuroses there. But it works. It absolutely works. And I think that we're really good as a company, especially now, maybe even for the first time, at really understanding everyone's superpowers so that we could, do the most and collectively benefit. And Neeve is great with ideas, but where I could claim being great at ideas, I'm not as good of a filter as Neeve is. And so having her in the studio has been just kind of magical because she does help to filter. And it means that we don't have less ideas than before, but they are getting done better than ever before, and they are getting filtered better than ever. So I guess a good place to start, Neeve, is when you came in, the first thing that happened is...
Well, wait, hang on.
Yeah.
You guys just jumped right over something cool, and I spent all day being like, what is going to be something cool? And I'm like, you can't miss it now.
No, please.
I was thinking about that. Yes, let's hear the something cool.
Okay, well now there's all this pressure because so this is
better
off
be
the top
cool.
of my head.
Off the top.
Do you want one of us to go
play it.
first, and then we can circle back like it's all casual?
We've all got questions.
Yeah. Let's
Okay.
redo that moment, make it super casual.
Okay, hey, who's got something cool? Dave, do you have a something cool this week?
Never start with me.
All right, well, Sean and I will share a something cool unless...
Well, you could do our mutual something cool. I want to do something cool on behalf of Cindy. Because for
wow, something cool on behalf of Cindy. That's our new segment.
Well, I don't have anything cool. Johnny's got my cool thing for the week. I went to Mexico last week. That was really cool. But Cindy's been trying to do a handstand for a couple of years now, all by herself and hold it. And she did it in yoga this morning. And she came home really happy because they told her it was like they usually count down to 10 seconds on something like that. And she did it. And then after it had been 10 seconds, the person said, all right, now 10 seconds. And she did it for the full 20 because she had done it. And then they counted down and she did it for 20 seconds. And she was like, never done that before.
I could barely stand for 20 seconds.
Dave's standing beside Cindy and they're both kind of shaking a little bit. Like, how long are they going to make it?
Dave definitely can't stand for 20 seconds if his back is to the door.
My something cool is that Sean and I took a research trip earlier this week, and it was the coolest research trip that we've taken. Our friend Chip has a fully legal cannabis grow operation in Oklahoma, and we went to his farm, and that was actually super cool to see all this stuff growing live and how they harvest it and how they dry it out and everything. And
do they have weed cows like the mushrooms on Minecraft?
Yes.
Like
yes,
one person got that joke.
They have weed cows, Dave.
Awesome.
Yeah, I imagine we'll have Chip on a show actually relatively soon because he's a great storyteller and he's fun. Like he's an entrepreneur. He's an idea guy. He's totally one of us. His entrepreneurial endeavor just happens to be weed.
But he has a bunch of them. I mean, a lot of them are weed related, which is something we were talking to him about. But he has other ones too. Like he's just an entrepreneur.
Yeah, he's really he's crafty, and he's someone who I really like his approach to the business anyway. Just because he's of the earth. Like he's not someone who's hopping onto this and trying to get rich. Like he's lived in Humboldt for many years. And anyway, yeah, it was a really fun trip, and Johnny and I have a really crazy, amazing project that we're wanting to write sometime this year for release next year that he was kind of instrumental in giving us color for.
Neeve, do you happen to have anything by chance?
Well, now that you mention it, no, I was thinking about it, and I was like, I really like it's. I was thinking about all the books that I read, and I'm like, I haven't really been reading anything because I've been listening to this podcast. I haven't been watching anything because I've been listening. And I was like, okay, so the podcast that I've been listening to is obviously my something cool. But it's one that I listen to every October. And it's a podcast called Spooked. And if you've ever listened to Snap Judgment, it's made by them, but it's kind of like This American Life, except creepy stories. So it's just all of these people telling their scary ghost stories, supernatural stories, weird shit happening to them, but it's all done like really artistically, then with a beat, like with sound effects and stuff. So I'll be listening to this, and I crochet, so I sit there and I crochet and I listen to this, and then like all of a sudden tingles will go over my whole body, and it's like, oh, so I get terrified, but I get obsessed with it, and they only do it every October. And that and Snap Judgment, I mean, that's really good. People tell their real life stories, but I always find that I get really good ideas for like, oh, that was that, like, what was it about that? Because none of the stories have anything like overtly like, oh, and then something jumped out at you. All of them is just this like feeling of unease. So I'm always like, what things about that story made me feel that way?
Florida.
And it's like these tiny little details, and I'm like, I'm going to harvest them and save them for later when I need to scare someone. But I think like that and Snap Judgment are just amazing places for storytellers to get good ideas.
All right, well, there's 3 quick takeaways in what you just said. The first is you guys can all trust Neeve's judgment on what she likes. Everything that she's ever recommended that I've checked out has been great. But also, let's not gloss over the fact that you crocheted. you want to talk at all about the fact that you are like a regular crocheter? Like you just said that like it was nothing.
No, I am not a regular crocheter. That comes from my kids go to an alternative school. And for fundraising every year, right around November, they go, by the way, every family has to give us 10 handmade items made of all natural materials.
Oh, fuck that.
For our school. And I'm like, can't I just bake some brownies or something? I'm like, no.
That's what Chip does for his school.
Yeah. No, we have to.
I would shit in a can. That's natural.
Oh my God, Dave.
It's not just handmade, it's natural materials. So I last year I sewed all of these. Oh my God.
Dave sowed what he reaps.
It's not even worth talking about. So I got ahead of it, of the game this year, and I was like, they're going to email me. It's going to be mid-November. I'm going to start to, so I taught myself how to crochet snowflakes and flowers, and I bought all cotton material, and I got them all done. And then today got the email. I was like, yes.
That'd be funny if they asked for something completely different.
No, thank God.
And when you
That would
said alternative
Yeah.
school, I was thinking like, what are they practicing? Like,
No,
alternative
but
music?
That's where Nirvana went.
Yeah, Nirvana.
But this year they have the added layer of they want you to come in and do it at the school as part of like
Oh, what the fuck?
social
Why are you
circle.
gonna jump through hoops?
I know, and I was like, look guys, I've got the all natural cotton. I've taught myself how to crochet. That is
Oh my
that is
God.
it. Like
Snowflakes.
I'm done. I'm not going to do it around people. Like
Well, my third thing was just that I love that you fought for your something cool. Like, that in itself is really rad. You're like, damn it, I was coming on today. I had my something cool prepared. They barreled forward. So yeah, that was
Maybe this is the point where we should point out that the feedback we've gotten about shortening up the preamble is not going to be heeded. This is not the spirit of it. All right,
It's gonna get
so
longer.
yeah, you guys are
this is
doing
like-
really good at that, and I'm like, wait, let's add on.
no.
to
It's not. It's just it's not in our nature. We're unable to do it. Like
we're
how
naughty
Sean
by
and I-
nature. Is that what you're saying?
We're naughty by nature. Okay, so moving
Oh,
on.
you don't want my something cool?
You said you didn't have one.
No, I didn't. I said. I
Oh,
don't
you
wanna
said
go
don't
first.
come to me. Okay,
So
let's hear
don't come
Dave's.
to me first. Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Let's hear it.
Mr. Robot's new season.
Is
The
this its final
season.
season?
Yes, and like every year they do something like you don't expect, and
Like
you're
the
what
Alf episode?
That was the best episode of
No,
TV.
like an episode with a twist or something. So, and I'm always like, you
Wait,
know,
having Alf in the episode wasn't a twist? It was a twist for me. I didn't see it coming.
no, and I'm not gonna spoil what the twist of that season was, but every season there's like some like reveal, and you wonder what it's gonna be, and it's the one show that like I don't know what the fuck is gonna happen, and I absolutely love it. It's the only show that's ever defied my expectations and exceeded them at the same time every single season. So I fucking love it. If you haven't caught up, I think it's on Amazon Prime. Watch that shit. And now Johnny's gone.
I was just like, no, that.
Hold on, I just
Yeah,
had to go
Dave.
over there.
You're something
So the-
cool, asshole.
All right. Well, so our topic today is about how we generate ideas. So, I mean, we sort of made some show notes, but I think it's probably better just to toss it to. I feel like Sean could start this discussion on how we generate ideas. What do people need to know? I mean, I think that ideas are seen as elusive, and you need to catch them with a butterfly net, and
Or in the
it's really
basement.
Well,
Right,
yeah. So I would say that Neeve and I have different but heavily overlapping approaches to ideation. And I think it's probably a good place to start the conversation is talking to Neeve about how she came in. And like, because you're coming into an idea mine. Like there's just not only do the ideas come from the top, all of our story meetings are just about ideas. And then, we get into, regular Area 51 marketing meetings or whatever meetings we have. They're basically idea generation, like ours. And then, so you're already an idea person and now you're coming into an environment where the ideas are constantly raining. Like the first thing you said to us is not exactly slow the fuck down, but like, hold on, I need to process. So Neeve and I had.
you're good at setting limits too. It's just like, okay, hold on, this sounds interesting, but I need to go home and process. Just hold on, just hang back.
That.
Yeah, every time.
This morning we talked for, we had a morning meeting because we're building something really big. And so Neve's basic thing was like, look, I need to process. if I can't process, then there's only so much I can do. And so that's so much a part of your ideation, where like you've taught me that, you know, I mean, Johnny has taught me that, Cindy has taught me that. But I think you more than anybody have really helped me to see the application, because when you execute, you execute. So it's
so
like,
does Dave, ironically.
here's this idea. I need to sit with it for a while. And then it's like, okay, this is going to work if we get rid of this part of it, if we double down on this part of it, and if we bring this person in to help us figure out this part that we don't really know. So like, talk a little bit about that, about how when you came in, you kind of had to make our way of doing things, well, more like you had to influence our way of doing things so that they were more sustainable.
Yeah, I think a lot of ideation to me is processing. Like that's where all the magic happens, in the time that you and space that you give your brain to apply to an idea. And so it depends on like what context you're talking about it in. Like when you're talking about me coming into Sterling and Stone, yeah, there's a ton of ideas, and I found that really overwhelming. I tend to have one of those brains where I like latch onto something and I'm kind of obsessed with it until it's all figured out. And I really like to get to what's underneath it, which I think is true in marketing or in book ideation or any kind, really, where you're like, well, like, what's the most important thing here? Like, what is it that we're actually trying to do? Is it that we're trying to like make someone feel something? Is it that we're trying to you know, to try this whole new strategy, but, you know, we're starting like we were talking this morning about wide, and it's like, okay, well, if you're wide, but you have an audience that you've built on Amazon, you also have to make sure that you have another strategy for bringing in people who buy books in places other than Amazon, you know? So sometimes it's things like that where you just need to like let it all simmer, and then let like, what is the main thing, the most important thing, come to the forefront. And for me, unfortunately, that takes time. And I think the very first thing I told you guys about working with me was like, I'll always say no first.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
And
you
that
are me.
Yes. But that's
yes, but
literally
no, but she
5
eventually says yes in a lot of cases.
Yes, and her right. I love that you said that, and I love that you've been allegiant to that. So it is very easy to get swept up in the enthusiasm, and Neeve doesn't allow that to happen. She's enthusiastic almost always, but you definitely need your time to sit with an idea and figure out where the holes are and where the strengths are. So it's
that's
almost
my Daviness.
yes, but Dave does tend to look for the weaknesses and not the strengths. And you don't do that. You really do say, okay, what are the positives of this idea, and how can I get excited about it? And you know, that's really important too, because you are very much somebody who needs to feel passionate and excited about something, or it has a very short shelf life. And so you're not somebody who can like gut through it. You have the intelligence and you have the work ethic to gut through things you don't want to do, but you don't have the internal drive. Like, you're just too curious. Also, one of the things that makes your ideation exceptional is that you have ambition. Like, some of your ideas are really big. So like right now, Neeves' whole thing is, I want to figure out how to sell fiction better than anyone in the world. Right. Which is not a small, it's not a small ambition, but it's perfect for us because.
No, but having worked with Neeve for a while, I'm actually really, really excited that it was that emphatic of a statement.
Yes, absolutely. Because we are going to figure this out. Like, there's several of us in the company who that's our goal. We're going to be the best. We are going to be the best studio in the world.
But also just because I flat out believe she can do it.
At creating, not just creating fiction, because that's part of it, but selling fiction. And Johnny and I, like, we're definitely heavily invested in creating the best fiction in the world. Like, we want to do that. That's what we want to be known for. Selling that fiction is a separate thing. And we don't, even if we wanted to be the best in the world, we're not driven in that way to figure it all out and to do it. We'd rather create. Neeve is a perfect partner in that, because she's coming in and saying, you know what? I love watching how the fiction is made. Like, I love that. And I want to be a part of that where I can. But you know what really, really excites me? To sell fiction better than anyone in the world. And so she's got like this perfect partnership because she's like, all right, you guys go make some shit for me and I'm going to sell it. And we're like, this is awesome. Neeve, we're going to make some shit for you and you're going to sell it. And we're thinking in terms of intelligent design to all of our funnels and our reader's journey.
How do you feel about that, Dave? Turn into intelligent design on this bitch.
Well, I do believe God had a hand in creating Neeve.
There you go. It all works out.
Perfect blend of all three. Well,
Yes.
actually, I do think that there's a couple things there. And one, I mean, the reason why I love, like, nobody likes, like, I'm going to go and sell you something. Well, some people do, but that's not my
I know a
reason.
few people who are exactly like that, Neeve.
Yeah,
so I
okay.
think you're wrong.
But like, I think generally speaking, writers,
I think we don't like those people.
don't like that. Yeah, but like, so that's not how I view it. But to me, selling is the exact same as writing. What excites me about both things is like having people feel something. Like, that's why I like writing fiction, is being like, ooh, and then this is gonna happen and they're gonna be like, no, you know, like how people will respond. I see marketing is very much the same thing, where, you know, where you can almost like feel someone's excitement. Oh, and then if I tell them about this at this point, they're going to get super excited, and this is the perfect follow-up to that thing. And it's kind of like orchestrating an experience for people, and I think that's what fiction is as well. But in terms of ideas, I think that there's sort of like, there's almost like idea drunkenness, where when idea, you just get so like swept up in it, excited. This I think usually happens to people when they're at the like book level or series level or world level, where you're like, oh my God, the possibilities, and it's super exciting. And then when you like boil it down into the minutia, that's where some of the enthusiasm can wane, because that's where you're actually in the execution of the idea. And so I find that for a lot of people, they'll get really swept up in the wonder of the ideas, but they'll sort of get stuck there, stuck in the planning, stuck in the like.
Is that because at some point when the idea has no limits and no responsibilities, it's just so much more fun, and then
it's a dream at that point. It's like, here's how big it can be. And then when you're in execution, and the same is true in marketing or in book writing, when you're in execution or in like, you know, Marie is always like, oh, Act 2 doldrums, which she didn't have on her most recent project. But, you know, when you're in that point, when you're in that point, it can feel really, really heavy, because now you're in the bit where you're like doing the slog. And I actually was thinking that I recently finished A Tale of Two Authors, which I have to throw out there because. Oh,
did I know you finished that?
Oh my God, it's awesome. What?
Did I know you finished that?
No, I finished it an hour before this call. So
I'm so glad you read that. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. But what I loved about it was that, like, I felt like we got to go on the journey really, really fast. It like condensed 4 to 5 years of two authors going through the indie fiction sort of experience, but it took us through the years very quickly. And I think that that's what's hard for authors sometimes, is like, we're right here in the moment, and it takes a long time. Writing books takes a long time. Building momentum takes a long time. And so getting to sort of see that bigger picture is much more exciting. And I think that's why big ideas are sometimes easier and more exciting than the little things in the day-to-day minutia of executing those ideas.
Yeah, I think we saw that with Pete, right? So Pete is the one that, for sure, especially in the early days of my writing and publishing, I was all Pete, like, what's new idea? And right. But then by the end, you sit with those ideas longer. Like, Alexa knew how.
Sorry, I feel the need to clarify that you are talking about the two avatar authors within our parable, A Tale of Two Authors. You guys were talking kind of in your own language there for a bit. But Sean wrote a book called A Tale of Two Authors. That's our writer parable, and Pete and Alexa are the two characters in it. So I just go ahead and continue, but that would have been confusing without that.
Yeah. So So they're basically set to not say that one is right and one is wrong. In fact, that's one of the things, I forget what you called it, Neeve. It was like poly-perfect or something like that. That
Oh yeah, I hate that about parables. There usually is somebody who's perfect.
I said it was like Goofus and Gallant.
yeah, and we didn't want to do that at all. Like they're both like Pete is just more of a puppy dog, and honestly, I relate more to Pete 5 years ago. Now I relate more to Alexa. But I think the point was to show that there's this spectrum, and that's true with ideas too. I think that so one thing, here's a habit that I have now versus a long time ago. So when I first was, into creative life, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to write, basically when I went from an offline life to an online life, and I met Dave, like that whole time, I would write every idea down because I was afraid I wouldn't, have that idea ever again. So I'd keep an idea on my nightstand. I'd constantly record. I'd scribble into everything. I'd go to a conference. I'd bring a notebook. I just went to a conference last week, and it was like a really good conference, actually the best conference I've ever been to in a decade. And I didn't even have a notebook. I don't write things down. And the reason I don't write things down is because I'm now confident enough to know, and this is actually Neeves' principle, it's just expressed differently. The good ideas come back around. Like the good ideas stick with you and they settle and they become something that your brain starts to work out, and it eventually percolates back up to the top. And then that idea has value. I think the other thing for a lot of newer artists or newer creators, newer entrepreneurs, newer authors, I think that there's a scarcity mindset that the ideas are going to stop, or that the good ideas are going to go away, or that you're going to spend the wrong time on this thing and this other opportunity you'll miss out on. And so you just kind of move a little bit more frantically, and everything's a moving target, and ideas intrinsically lose their value. So you can have these really great ideas, but because you're doing a poor job of expressing them, you're leaving maybe ideas that aren't as sexy on the top. You're just letting them go fallow when they could monetize. So that was where Alexa was. Her ideas were a lot less sexy. They were just more practical. Like, yeah, I'm going to find the genre that I'm right for, and then I'm going to just write in it for 5 years. Like where, Pete is like, oh, I heard this genre is super, super profitable, so I could go start a pen name in that genre. And then another one is profitable, so he starts a pen name in that genre. And neither one is necessarily right or wrong, because there's a lot of people who are successful doing it both ways. It's more about finding out what is right for you and what your ideas cost. What does it cost to sit on this idea? What does it cost to execute on this idea?
Yeah, I think that's really important. In terms of ideas, there's a couple things there. One is getting that trust that you will have more ideas. And I think actually what you did at the start with marking down your ideas is really helpful. So if you're someone who has that feeling that like, oh, I have this idea and it's so good. Like I have this really, really sweet friend who just reached out to me on Facebook Messenger the other day and was like, oh my gosh, I'm exactly that person who has one idea and I love it so much, and I'm so worried it's the only good idea I'll ever have, that he's become frozen in fear and he can't write it. And so he reached out to me after a year of me not hearing from him and was like, okay, all right, I've just gone quiet because I'm just too scared. And now he still wants to write the same idea, which is great. I think he should go and write it. But I also think like, well, what if he had spent every day writing down another book idea and writing down another book idea, not to get carried away and swept up in idea drunkenness and like, oh, now I want to write that one more. Now I want to write that one more. It's like staying focused on like the task at hand, but continuously having more ideas will reiterate to yourself that you are an idea generator, and that's something that you can continuously do. And I find that actually really helps you not be afraid to write your book, because then you're switching from like, I must write the most perfect book to, oh my God, I got to get this book finished so I can get onto this other idea that I'm super excited about. And I think it's just a shift in how you perceive ideas.
What do you guys think about writer's block in the context of all this stuff?
I don't get writer's block, but I do get creative constipation, I guess.
No, there we go.
With you, Dave, it doesn't seem to be creative constipation so much as like when you get stuck, at least most of the time when I've seen you get stuck and it's something to work through, it's not the story that's giving you the problem. It's actually you that's giving yourself the problem. So, and that's not a punchline. Like, I actually mean it. Like, you're in your head because you're second guessing your instincts, or you're not really sure about some structural issue. But it's more like you're questioning yourself rather than like you don't know what to write.
Well, there's times that, you know, I don't like where the story's going and it needs to be fixed. One of my hardest times, though, like, you know, right now I gotta brainstorm this thing with you in a little bit, and when I have to come up with an idea, I tend to struggle to come up with an idea. It's usually not until I'm doing something else, like where I can't write or whatever, or I'm out walking, and then ideas are fucking like just smacking me in the face. So it's almost like a performance anxiety sort of thing. Like, if I'm on the clock and I got to come up with an idea, it's really difficult. But then when I don't have to, like, ideas just come. I
think it's more likely a brain state thing. So this is actually something that we did talk about in Endless Ideas, is that, you know, obviously your brain is in different states at different times and doing different activities. So when you're looking for an idea, you're very much in the logical brain trying to search for something that's correct. And then at the times where you're walking, or interestingly, also when you're telling biographical stories, but there's a few different time actions that you can do that sort of knock you into the turn on the default mode network, I think it's called, in the brain, which is basically when you're occupied and your mind is wandering and you're not thinking of much, and that's when your brain is actually processing all the stuff that's coming in. So if you know, oh, I need some ideas, and then you go out for a walk and you're not really thinking about it, that's when they'll all start popping up, because your brain is actually able to do that processing and to then deliver the ideas up to your conscious mind. It's when you've got the most communication happening. So that's like one thing you could do straight away, is like just always have your recording device on hand or something to like capture them.
Well, so like in this situation, Neeve, so what we're doing is we're actually brainstorming that Steal This outline, Dave and I, that's what we're going to do. And so in doing that, it would probably make more sense, rather than to try and really nail down the story, which is what Dave and I often will do in that very first talk. It would make more sense for Dave's way of processing to just talk about a shit ton of ideas, see what gets him excited, and then just let the conversation lie. And let those, like, let's see what percolates for him, right?
Well,
yeah.
What do you guys think that would happen in the middle, though? So like your person who's running, oh, I'm blocked. I'm in the middle of a story and I'm blocked. How do you get past that, and how do you get the ideas then?
For me, I think you change contexts. I think anytime I don't know what to write, or I don't know what my angles should be, I change context. Like, what question can I ask? Even if, like, I'm not changing perspectives. So something that really helps in fiction, especially the way that, well, both me and Johnny and me and Dave, we really like multiple POVs, because that's always like really helpful in the story. You jump to somebody else's perspective, it keeps it going, and then you're back. But even if you're not writing in somebody else's perspective, looking at the world from their perspective can jog your ideas for how to continue with that one character. Because maybe there's some way that this other person sees them that they can now respond to, or your story can kind of respond to that question.
What do you mean by change context? Is that what you're talking about right now?
Yeah. So anything that changes the way that you look at that story. So, I mean, one version of this idea is in Mad Men. This is one of my favorite moments in Mad Men. It's I forget which season it is, but basically they're going to lose the Lucky Strike account. And so Dawn, like, Lucky Strike has basically been their bread and butter for a long, long time. And this is a huge blow to the advertising firm, because losing Lucky Strike will mean that everyone will know, because it's a gossipy industry, and it will cost them a bunch of other business. And it's their most important business, their biggest client. So the only way to take control of this is that Dawn takes out a front page or a full page ad in the New York Times that's an open letter that basically says, "Dear tobacco industry, we as an advertising firm with a conscience can no longer advertise for cigarettes." And basically fires them very publicly before that they can do it. And all the partners are pissed at him because he just kind of went and did this without anybody, without asking for permission. But then he says what is one of my favorite quotes of the entire show, which is, "If you don't like what's being said, change the conversation." And that I really took that into like everything, into the way I ideate and the way that I tell a story. So if I don't like what I'm saying, or if I feel stuck, then I just try to change the conversation in whatever way I can. I think about how other people in the story are being affected by the main storyline. I think about how, really anything that pushes my brain in a different position than it's been. Because a lot of times when you're stuck in one place, it's just because your RAM is looping. You've got a rainbow spinning or whatever. Like your brain is just
rainbow spinning.
Right. Your brain is
made
just,
by Apple.
Yeah, your brain is just looping over the same bullshit over and over and over.
I'm more likely to have what Dave has, where you're like stuck on a problem. Like, so I can't keep going if I'm like, there's a fundamental problem.
But can you take a step back and say like, like if I went back, so changing the context could be just going back one chapter and saying, is the problem exist in this chapter? Did it manifest for the first time 3 chapters back? Like, how do you identify what it is that's giving you an issue?
Well, for me, usually I'll have this like sinking feeling. Like today, I was talking to Ben about a Steal This outline, which is one that we're going to work on together. And I was like, we were talking about the mystery and who could be the potential person. We're like, oh, okay, and this person, will be the not the killer. It's not a killer in this instance, but the person.
Antagonist?
Yes, the antagonist. Thank you. Yeah. So, and I was like, yeah, okay, but it just feels like meh. And if I feel meh, that's when I get really stuck. And that's happened to me a few times in stories where I've got this whole outline but I just get sort of like okay, and then they'll just keep writing to the inevitable. But what happens is when I have that feeling, I'm like, okay, there's something wrong. Something wrong is it feels very like I go down to like, well, what am I feeling? I'm feeling bored. If I'm feeling bored, I'm convinced the audience feels bored too. So then I'm like, well, what's boring about it?
That's a very reasonable assumption.
I'm like, okay, what's boring about it? Oh, what's boring is it all feels obvious and it feels like there's nothing exciting about this because it's all right there. So then what I do, which I found always snaps me out of it, is I'm like, okay, well, if this is obvious, what are some other potential outcomes that could happen? And so what I like to do is, for me, it's really, really helpful because I'm very logical, is to continue to tell myself there is no one right way the story can go. There is no one right idea here. This was just one idea. And so then instead of sitting there, because for me, writer's block is when I'm sitting there going, what is the best idea? So instead of doing that, I will just continuously write ideas. I'll be like, then my main character could die, then this could happen, then that could happen. And it's usually really ridiculous stuff. But in there, something will pop up that I'll get excited about. And so then I go by that feeling. I'm like, ooh, that's exciting.
Do you set fences around yourself at all? Like, will you say, if I'm doing this a half hour from now, I have too many ideas? Because there is such a thing as too much generation, right?
I don't think there is. I think like tons of generation, you can use it at some point, and then you are picking the best.
But at some point, are you procrastinating? Are you using idea generation as a way to get away from the actual work?
I think as soon as you've got the problem solved, you know it, and then you want to go back to work because you're excited again.
Yeah, all right, that makes sense.
So I would do this in 2 ways. One, I would never just sit at the computer and go, I'm stuck now, I'm going to sit and write ideas. To your point about context, I get myself in a different context. Like I would go out for a walk, which I can't do at the moment, but I would like get myself away from my desk.
Would you like to do a special show about your foot?
No.
Can we do a walking Neeve show?
Oh God.
Hobbling Neeve.
Be like, ow.
I find with the times when I've gotten blocked, it's never one simple what should happen next question. It's always like, and I'm curious whether anybody can relate to this. So I think that you can't, I was actually, thinking when you were talking about like this, trying to put myself in that situation, being like, okay, what should happen next? And what should happen next is never, ever, ever my question. Well, it is. But the real question is what the fuck is going on, because nothing feels right here. So, do you feel like there maybe are sort of different species here? Or Sean, maybe you, since you write with me and other people, it always feels like when I get blocked, you almost should just skip ahead 3 weeks of fucking around to realize, oh, there was a problem big enough you should have just started over, right? Does that make any sense?
Well, I don't think there's not always a big enough problem that you should have started over, but I think what you're saying.
But for me, I think there is. Like, I think I don't get blocked unless it's a fundamental issue.
I do agree with that.
Wants to start over.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, let's turn that a little bit, because I think that your instincts are more in tune with the story, Johnny, from working with you both. I think your instincts are more in tune with the story, and Dave's instincts are more about himself and how he feels about the story. So how do you know that line? Especially since I'm never actually privy to some of these early drafts that he throws away. I just get the later one, and I have to just take him at his word that it's much better than the one he threw away. So how do you know, Dave? Like, what is your determiner that, like, I feel good about this versus I don't feel good about that?
If the story doesn't feel right, like, there's so many ways it can go wrong. There's innumerable ways. When I fucking hate the story, or I feel like there's just so many things that go wrong for a story that just ruin it for me.
Is there a chance that, like, I could one day stumble upon an earlier draft of one of your stories and be like, what the hell? This is better than the one he delivered. That's impossible.
Yeah,
so
I think so.
When you do the second version, what is the primary thing that's usually changed?
Usually some major shit in the story. Like,
so is it like the way you see it, or a character perspective, or like one hook that like would have been too difficult to go back and seed because it just fundamentally changes it?
Any and all. It could oftentimes it's like, I don't like where the story's going. I don't like the ending at all, or the ending, I come up with a better ending, but in order to do that ending, I have to change a lot of shit in the beginning. Other times there's characters where I thought they were going to be something. They turned out to not be, they were a detriment to the story. So their storyline's got to go. Okay.
So I have an actual question, if you're comfortable talking about this.
All right.
So you just turned in a story this morning that I've already gone through. So you could talk fluidly about that. And it's a short story that at the very earliest will come out a year from now. So there's no risk of anybody getting spoiled or anything here. So if you want to talk about that, it might be a good example, because one thing that you said when you dropped the story off was you wanted an extra day on the story. And the reason you wanted an extra day is because now that you knew what the ending was, you could seed it better. So this might be a good example of what you're talking about. And I love that. I love the fact that you knew the end and now you're going to go seed it. So I've been through the story once. I can have this conversation with you about what it is. So what was it at the end, if you want to explain just quickly what the story is, and what it was at the end that you went back to seed, because I'm curious. Like, this is...
Well, did you like the story?
Yeah, I love the story. I thought it was really good. And I was curious. It had that sense of mystery that that I know is very important to you as a storyteller.
Yeah.
And also, just, I think this is interesting to talk about. Like, we all have our patterns. So like, I have my patterns of ideation. Neeve has her patterns of ideation. Dave definitely has his patterns. We all have our tropes, as storytellers. And so Dave has a few tropes. And it's interesting in short stories because you have such a small window. So you really do see them. But like sinister neighborhoods where there's like on surface level conformity in a neighborhood, but then like something kind of seething under the surface, that's definitely appeared in many of our series, standalones, and short stories. And, and that's here.
Never trust your neighbors.
Yeah, Dave clearly does not trust his neighbors. Like, it is... I mean, that could be his autobiography too. Don't trust your neighbors.
Well, you live in Florida, you learn.
But the last version of this story, because I think Dave's had a really amazing creative year, 18 months or so. And Dave wrote another story that was a short that was the same kind of premise, very loosely, about a gated community where there's weird shit going on. But it wasn't nearly as good as this one. It was a little more disconnected. It was basically, he had basically Dave probably woke up one day and he's like, fucking neighbors, can't trust them. They got worms. And like, he wrote some weird ass story about his neighbors all having worms under their skin. But this one had more like...
I have to point out that as we're talking about this, it looks like Johnny's peeking out the window at his neighbor. Like, I gotta watch these guys.
It's like an infection.
The recycling truck, like the garbage truck, just went by, and my dogs are barking, so I've been muted. And like, are they fucking gone yet? But yes, the suspicious neighbors.
Okay, so funny you should mention that story, because
the worm one or the one from this morning?
Yeah, the other one. So I'm writing this story, the one that I just writing. Okay, and okay, it's a story about a guy that hears a noise. Okay, and I've had different noise ideas and different, and then I recently read a story on like a very long form story, way too long actually, about this guy that heard just a sound that annoyed the shit out of him. I think it was in Arizona, and like other people didn't hear the sound. He heard the sound. It was bothering him. It was driving him fucking mad. He finds out it's like these data centers. They have these giant chillers, and they make this whine sound, and it was driving him nuts. And he's calling the police. He's trying to get this thing shut down. People like think he's a pain in the ass. Eventually he gets like a bunch of people together to kind of like not shut it down. You can't shut down a data center, but they basically kind of modulate the noise a little bit so it's a little less annoying. But in the end he still loses, because then another data center popped up. but like for a long time I've read stories about people that hear noises, like this hum or something, and there's times I hear noises, and like especially like when I'm about to drift off.
But then you feed them and close the basement door, and it's good.
Yes. So like I wanted to write something sort of paranoid, a little bit like you don't know if this guy's like lost his shit or what. So the initial story as I was writing it is like this guy's like he's trying to find the source of the noise, and it kind of ended like the other story ended, where he just finds this apartment with a bunch of people, like weird shit going on. It was going to be like some like dimensional whatever, and I was like, I just kind of wrote, and I forgot that I wrote that story. It's like I forgot my own story, and like this is very familiar to me. I am so repeating myself that the ending is going to be the same, and then I was like, so I'm going back through it. I'm like, well, I can't do that. And then I'm looking at his character, and I really like the stuff about his loss, like with his
yeah, that was great.
And his feeling of obligation that his father has like kind of put into him, that, and he's lost his job, so his life is upended. And then I started to think about one of my friends who died in a similar way to how his girlfriend dies, and how much like that affected me. So all of that changed the story, and it made it more personal to me. And I actually cried while I fucking wrote part of it. So I wanted the ending to really mean something. And none of that was in the first, like, I didn't know how it was going to end. None of that personal shit was in there.
Well, it's what makes the story.
Right. So that is the difference between my first draft and a better story.
So I should have given you the worm thing back. No, see, and I was okay with that one because it's a short. In shorts, you can get away with like just a weird what the hell ending. But I'm glad you didn't repeat yourself. I'm glad this one had some like logic to it, and so that was awesome. So thank you for clarifying. So
like all of us get stuck in the same way though. It's like there's something not working about the story, and then you can't move. Like I feel like it's then you get stuck because you can't move forward knowing you're writing something wrong.
Yeah, I feel like
Yes.
I feel like at this point I should almost recognize that if on Monday I'm stuck and on Friday things still don't like it doesn't feel a lot better, that I should just go back to the beginning and start the story over. Like I don't mean redraft it. I mean throw it away and do it again. That feels a little different than some of the things with Dave, but like I have things that I can get past and I have things that like, no, this is a symptom of a larger problem.
And I also have a fear of repeating myself. It's kind of dual-edged because on one hand, like people like to read similar things from their authors, but I don't want it to, like Sean will say, dude, you already fucking wrote this. This is like a trope and make me hyper aware of it. So I start doubting everything I want to write. So I'm sort of like kind of stuck between like what I think will be good and what like I'm thinking Sean's going to think of it.
Yeah, but you got to know that, like, I mean, that is the whole point of having collaborators, so that you're not out there alone, and you really should follow your instincts, because you're like, you always do take that as a bad thing that, okay, you've got Dave tropes. But the thing is, Stephen King has his every author has their tropes.
I have many tropes.
Yeah, I would argue Johnny has every bit as many tropes as you, Dave.
I think I have more tropes.
Yeah.
I really do. I have a bunch of things that repeat.
Like, and that's fine. It's what identifies you as a storyteller. So you have your tropes, Dave. Johnny has his tropes, but then there's very specific Johnny and Sean tropes and Dave and Sean tropes. Like, our stuff reads a certain way, and that works. That's what readers love. When we have a reader who will read everything we write, it's because they're looking for some of those echoes.
I do fear that when they are ever present, that the reader will also know what's going to happen next. And well, I always want that element of surprise.
I'm not as worried about that, because as storytellers, we layer things differently book to book. I actually think your limitations aren't really a big deal. Your limitations are mostly in naming people and things, settings, and occupations. Like, there's only a few occupations that you draw on, and there's only
function.
And a few settings that you draw on. But like, that makes sense. Like, when's the last time you left your house and went on an adventure?
I'm gonna write exclusively people that like work at Target now.
Like, I mean, I would love the Dave version of Eat, Love, Pray, which I think could be amazing. But until we get that, I think it's fine. Like, you pass it to me, and that's where, like, that's what the collaboration is for. That's not
eat, hate, reject your deity.
You could tell a pretty sweet story about a road trip from Florida to Austin, because you've got tons of stories from that. And if you have someone going on a road trip for an event in Austin, it's autobiographical.
Oh, I think
nobody wants to read that. I
think we understand where this steal this conversation is going to go in a few minutes. Okay, so Neeve, just for everybody's benefit, what is the number one criteria that you look at? Because as far as, refining all the ideas in the company, that is kind of your role. So what is it that you do to grade an idea? How do you decide, is this something that I think is good for the entire company?
Well, it can be different depending on in what context, but almost always the number one criteria to look for is which idea out of the ideas that I have. You never want to just sit there and talk about one idea, because then it's impossible to compare it, I think, to others, unless you're saying, do I want to do this with all my other stuff? And then you can see whether or not it fits your outcome. But I think it's what idea will lift the most weight. So if you know what you want to accomplish, and in your writing, in your books, you want to typically accomplish hitting your tropes for whatever genre it is, because tropes are important. Also, you probably want to have your audience feel something. You probably have a particular feeling that you're aiming for. You will want to put your character into trouble. You want to have everything be difficult for them. You want to have their flaws aggravated. You have all these various things that you're trying to do. And especially if you've been reading any craft books and things like that, all of that is in your head. But I find that that's usually how you can identify, out of all the ideas and the things you could do. I always just pick, well, what's the one that's going to do the most? So like, I would pick an idea that's both going to make my reader feel something and put my character in peril, and is also, hitting on some of the tropes, so you look, it's not trying to make every idea do everything. It's just saying, of the ideas I have, which lift the most weight for me. And then as well, like if it's a marketing idea or a business idea, I'm absolutely looking at what is the cost of doing this idea. So if I do this
cost
idea,
in time, money, or dependent on what the situation is.
and for me, one of the major costs I rank is mental power, because I think, Sean, I don't know what it's like inside your brain, but I think
it's
looks
a hamster
amazing.
on crack.
No, seriously, I admire you so much, because not only do you have all this stuff going on, you hang on to it. Like you hold on to details, and you have excellent recall and all these things that I wish my brain would do, but it doesn't. So when I'm looking at an idea, I'm factoring in how much brain space will it take up in order to execute, and will that still leave me enough to do all these other things that I still have to accomplish?
Well, okay, I appreciate you saying that, but it's not as easy as it looks, and you've actually taught me a lot about valuing my processing space and setting aside, because there's times I'm letting it cycle for the wrong projects or the wrong things, or so yes, so thank you, but really, like, you have taught me a lot about I don't know, compartmentalizing or putting right ideas on the right containers and letting them do their work where they're supposed to.
I think the most important thing for ideas is, just to circle back to what we said right at the start, I think the most important thing is processing, is that the more time you give your brain to like if you want to have an idea, and sit down and look, to Dave's point, you say, I want to have an idea right now. That's a lot of pressure. But if you say,
now or you die.
Idea, you say, I want to have an idea. I want to do it to do a in this. And then you just like, basically, all you have to do is say that to yourself. I find, anyway, for me, that's enough for my brain to start working on it in the background. Then I go off and crochet, or I go off and play stupid games on my phone.
So I need to learn to crochet, is what you're saying.
Do you think that Dave would 10x his writing if he crocheted?
Yes.
Dave Crochet has a really good sound to it.
I think Dave Crochet also could be
That's my new name
for us.
Dave Crochet sounds like a special kind of crochet, where you crochet only
Very big things.
Yes, that's sort
Can
of
we
thing.
have a French guy in the outline we're about to brainstorm, Dave, named Dave Crochet?
No.
Please.
Yes.
All right. So when you circle back and you start talking about Dave Crochet, that means the episode's over. We could obviously talk ideas forever, which is kind of ironic considering that the book that we were talking about a lot was Endless Ideas. If you do want to check it out, if it sounds like something you want to know more of, Endless Ideas is awesome. And you can get it at sterlingandstone.net/endless-ideas, endless-ideas. And just because I should have mentioned it earlier, but when they were talking a lot about Alexa and Pete and stuff from the Tale of Two Authors, that if you're interested in that, that is sterlingandstone.net/2authors. TWO is spelled out. And thank you, Neeve, for being on again. This was really, really cool. It's always good to talk to you, but especially on the podcast. So hopefully people dug this.
Thank you for having me.
And next week, I don't know if we've decided, but we may do something that enrages Dave.
Oh,
But I mean, that's most things.
Oh, we will.
We're going to crochet.
That's gonna be fun.
He's already forgotten, I'll bet.
I actually have a pitch for next week's episode that we can talk about off air. But I also like the idea of enraging Dave. That could totally work.
It can be me teaching you how to crochet live.
Oh, I dig.
It's going to be fun.
I do dig that. The guys learn to crochet next episode. All right. So thanks everybody for listening. And we will see you guys on the next episode of the Story Studio podcast.
Adios.
Bye.